Oh, hello.
Hi there. How are you?
I can't believe you're here.
What a coincidence.
It's wild. This is, of course, Fall into Reading. It is the finale. We've done it. We fell
Wow.
into reading all
The
fall.
the music is swelling.
Yep, it's
The
getting cold
clouds are
out.
parting. James gets it.
James totally gets it. Thank you for that, James. And we are, of course, talking about El Defo today and Messy Roots.
Yeah, it is our Thanksgiving sides. If you're in the
Yep.
States, you probably spin it with a collection of characters, maybe some you love, maybe some you tolerate. And so we were like, let's do some of our favorite graphic memoirs, an eclectic group to sit down at the Thanksgiving table with. And I'm glad we did because I love Messy Roots, you love El Defo, and we did get to
Mhm.
do a swap this time that was
Yeah,
less controversial maybe than the last swap
it's
that we
true.
did. So that was pretty exciting.
Very exciting. And what else is exciting? Well, it's our not sponsor,
Ooh.
which are our anticipated winter releases. So 'tis the season to buy stuff. It is the weekend for it.
Or request it from your library. Well, in this
Right,
case, request it ahead of time because they haven't quite come
right,
out yet. But support your
right.
local library. Maybe if you're going to buy
Yeah.
it, still request it. The author
Pre-order
will
it
get
from.
double. Yeah.
Yeah, authors love pre-orders.
Mhm.
Should we start with you? Shall we? You
No, I want to start with you,
want
Kristen.
to start with me?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay, let's go. Let's go.
It looks like a business meeting. You're like
Listen,
pie chart,
I didn't even try. I was like,
bar
let's just
graph.
sort of throw a theme on this. I saw the first slide of yours, and it's very cute. So
Oh,
you went above and beyond. It's
thanks,
okay.
thanks, thanks.
But here we go. We're in December now, December 6th. I'm very excited for both of these. Blood on the Tracks, Volume 15. If anyone knows anything, they know I've been reading this. It is wild, and that's all. That's the best way to describe it. I can't even tell you what it's about. It's wild. Also, all the trigger warnings. Heads up. But I'm very excited for Volume 15. I need to read 14, so I plan to do that very soon.
Oh, you're
Um,
behind. Is Mary
yeah,
caught up? She ahead of
she
you?
is.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
yeah, she's caught up. So we're both very excited about that, I think. But more than anything, I am excited, of course, about The Great British Bump Off by John Allison. I have the first issue of this. Did I read it yet? No, I didn't. Of course I didn't. But I'm absolutely buying the trade. Look at this cover. I mean, it's this
The
cover. It's
title.
John Allison. Yeah, Max Sarin does the art, who I adore, like, who did a lot of Giant Days. It's just great. It's great. 'Tis the season. I'm very excited.
You know, I read the first 2 issues of that.
You
Look
did.
at me. Yeah, it was pretty good. It
Wow.
was pretty good. I'm gonna definitely request it from the library.
Okay, we love that. December 19th, of
Oh,
course. Of
are
course.
we gonna
Hard
toll?
stuff for Volume 5. Did we
Maybe.
twin on this?
Maybe.
So I have to just mention real quick, I have been behind on the show, and I finally caught up yesterday.
Oh, that's a
Yeah,
heartwarming catch up this time of year.
it
Love
was
that.
a cozy, cold night catch up.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to have done that. But yeah, I'm very excited for Volume 5. I'm excited there's going to be one after this because
I'm not
for
ready.
so long we were told that's it, this is it. So I'm excited, but I'm also not ready. I'm with
But
you.
that's actually a live depiction of Alice Oseman and the fans. They're like, "We're
Mm,
never letting you go." Like, it's hard for me
yeah,
too, you know?
please don't stop our heart. Keep
I
going.
also wanna say I've seen this cover so many times, and I'm so confused about whose legs are whose at the beginning. I've got it now, but for the
Yeah,
longest time, I was like, "What is happening
I
here?"
see what you mean.
Yeah, mhm,
Yeah.
interesting, but yeah, I'm pumped for this.
Hey, Dad.
Hey, Larry.
January 10th, we have a triple feature here. We have the
Wow.
next Fence volume, volume 6, which is just, again, exciting. It's coming out because we used to think there would never be more. So I'm excited about this. Bunny Mask, the Cave Collection. It is the hardcover of the first 2 volumes. I haven't read the second one. I think I'm just going to grab it, which I don't usually do. I have the first trade.
What
But I
is
love
Bunny Mask?
Bunny Mask is wild. So it is about, let's see, we start off, this guy gets trapped or thrown into, question mark, a cave
Okay.
where there's a small child also in there, this little girl who her dad put in there, and they're both stuck, and They're stuck in there for a long time, trying to survive. And I'm just super it's been a bit, so just
No, it's okay.
take this with a grain of salt. But at some point, Bunny Mask shows up, and it's this creepy lady with a bunny mask, and
I
she
see.
like saves them, and you're like, what's happening? So then, it was many years ago. Cut to many years later, this guy is driving around town, and he sees a woman in a shop, and he's like, and he sees a bunny mask like sculpture, and he's like, what is happening? So he just like pulls over immediately, gets out of the car, goes in there, and stares at it, and he's so confused. And because again, a lot of it he thought was in his head, and was he imagining things? And then the little girl that he met in the cave comes up to him, and she's like, oh my gosh, it's me. And he's like, what? Okay, if that description sounded confusing, it's because it should.
No, it sounded good. I'm intrigued.
It's wild and thrilling, and if you're not addicted by the first volume, I will be confused.
I'm going to write this one down to see if my library has the first volume.
Yeah, if they don't, make them get it.
Get it. I say so. Your patron.
Yeah. I'm also excited to get from my library the Rogue and Gambit Power Play, which is from the series from this year, which I haven't read. You know, I gotta read all the Rogue stuff I can. So
I get it.
Yeah. This cover looks ridiculous to me, but it also makes me wonder what's happening.
Also, I've not read Fence yet. It's been on my list forever. I also thought the series was done. So when you were like, we didn't know we were getting another volume, I was like, okay, good. Because now I felt silly if it hadn't been. So I might check that one out as well.
You totally should. It's a fun time. January 17th, the Dynamite Darkwing Duck that has been going on this year that I haven't read any of is coming out. They're going to release a hardcover too, like a paperback and a hardcover. So that's kind of neat. I think this is a hardcover cover. Look at all these ducks. I don't know. I just really want to read it. It's mostly nostalgia. I'm like, you know, which I loved as a kid. So I'm excited about that. And more nostalgia, Ooh. January 24th. The Gargoyles trade / hardcover is also coming out. So they're back to back, and I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I need to get that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a blast. February 14th, we got Marvel Unleashed, of course, by Kyle Starks. I'm very excited for this trade to come out. Look at this cover. Come on. What more do you want?
So this is like Super Pets, but Marvel, kind of? Is that the vibe? I haven't read it.
That's the vibe, yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Is Jeff in this?
No.
Okay, that's devastating. You'll have to talk to Kyle.
Well, he actually had a different lineup, but Marvel was very much like, you have to have these characters.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. But it's a good lineup. I mean, you know, you got a great gang here, and I'm excited. Oh, James says Darkwing Duck has been amazing. Thank you, James. Ooh. I'm glad to hear it. All right, and then February
these just
28th.
Keep coming. The Cat Gamer. I feel like I've been seeing you with a new Cat Gamer every 5 seconds.
You know, I thought that we had like the 2 volumes for a while, and then I was like, where are the rest? And then they released volume 3, and now they're like, okay, we'll give you 4. And I'm like, great.
Dang.
Well, who's this? This isn't the same cat.
Oh, is it not?
There's a second cat. Yeah.
The
first cat's a tuxedo. I'm excited. And this is the last of my slides. I could have kept going. But, you know.
Gotta save money.
There's already a lot, yeah. Gotta save money. So those are my anticipated reads.
I loved that. And before we hopped on, we were like, did you get anything for Black Friday? And I was like, I'm really trying to save money. And then now I've got books that Kristen's making me get. She's holding me against my will in a cave. And I'm going to be broke.
Well, you can always, again, ask your library to get stuff.
I'm going to.
Yeah. Sure. So look at your cute little slide.
Let's go.
We're not in a business meeting anymore.
We are now in cozy town, except for I don't know that many of these books are cozy. A couple of them are.
Okay. I'm looking forward to that. Twins. 1219 twins.
Because how can you not? How can you not?
How can you not?
Well, you've already said it all. I'm just so much anticipation for this volume. Heartstopper, what is there to say that hasn't been said, except for it's just so remarkable to me how heartwarming and affirming and cozy these reads are while managing to tackle actually some pretty serious topics. I've heard people talk about the show a lot as like fluff or the book as fluff. And I don't think there's anything wrong with fluff, to be clear. If that's what people are getting out of it, that's also good. But when you actually break down the plot for people, a lot of serious things are in there, but you feel good because the characters are so earnest and so kind towards one another. It's a very kind book. So even though they're dealing with difficult things, I think Osman treats them all with a kindness that I just love as a reader to witness. So very excited for volume 5 and like scared how I'll feel when I finish that there's only one left. I've got to be honest. I'm a little sad about it.
Me too.
But yeah, we'll be twinning. Maybe we'll read at the same time. I'll probably read it like the day it comes out because these take 2 seconds to read.
Yeah.
But yeah, excited about that. And then this one's been on my list. Yours for the Taking by Gabrielle Korn. I don't know if it's a debut or not. I should have looked it up. This is an adult novel. And things that I know about it are it's science fiction. I want to read more adult sci-fi. I read adult fantasy here and there, but not as much straight science fiction, which I'm understanding this is. It's like a sort of dystopian 2050 climate change kind of dystopian. But the main premise is this girl who's living in Brooklyn becomes an intern at this corporation that's like a female-run corporation. And when she goes in, it's like all female employees, which at first is like kind of rad, but she finds out there's something a bit more sinister underneath. So I'm very excited for this one. I'm going to do this one on audio. I already used my credit on Audible because Jasmine Savoy Brown of Yellow Jackets narrates it. And I was like, whoa, I don't know that she's done a lot of narration either, which kind of makes me think this is potentially like she was selected for it or it's a bit of a passion project. So it just piqued my interest.
Which character is that?
Oh, she plays Thaisa.
Oh, okay, cool.
Young Thaisa.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited for this one. I have read like mixed advance reviews, but the main criticism I've seen is the characters are written a bit young and maybe immature, which is fine with me because sometimes adult sci-fi is a little too highbrow for me. So I'm probably going to be in the sweet spot of readers, or at least that's what I'm hoping. 1212, this is a bit of a cheat because I've already read it and I'm actually waiting for a larger collection, but just to put it on people's radar, I guess, Dark Knights of Steel, Volume 2 comes out. This is kind of one of those Elseworlds. We're in a medieval DC land book. It's Tom Taylor. I think Tom Taylor does just a remarkable job at capturing, no matter whether it's Elseworlds or in canon, etc., the voice of so many DC characters so well. The first volume, I've read it a couple times now, is super fun. And the second volume is really opening up the story. My understanding was this was supposed to be limited, but it's getting expanded. I feel like this happens all the time. Just know that if it's Tom Taylor, it's going to keep going. So I'm not totally caught up, so I'm not sure where we're at currently, but I believe I've read most, if not all, of the contents that will be collected. It's still worth checking out if you're a DC fan at all. It's been a blast.
Nice.
Yeah. January, look at me, 1-2 was crooked. That's a rookie mistake here, a little off center. The second omnibus for Wade's Daredevil's coming out. You may recall this was in my fall anticipated releases, the first one, because it's a hole in my collection that I've had for a very long time. I was like, I'll wait. And then I fell out a little bit with collecting. And then now I couldn't get it. And so now I can, and I'm very excited. I do think the releases of these are inspiring me to do a full Daredevil reread. I told you I also want to reread all my Flash books because of the solo characters I have the most books of for sure. And I want to kind of curate those or also identify where holes in my collection are that I want to seek out. So definitely excited about this one. And then No One Can Know. So Kate Alice Marshall, this summer, I think it was, I told you, I read one of her young adult books. She's an author that has mystery and horror, adult and YA. They're usually a main character that's a female, and very often they're a queer, either main or supporting character. So this is definitely of interest to me. The one I read this summer was like a horror that was at a boarding school. It sounded great, but it was kind of middling in the end. And I've been wanting to try one of her adult books, and this one piqued my interest. It's basically this woman who, um, her and her husband, I believe, both lose their jobs, and she's a bit estranged from her family. But because they're kind of desperate, they go home, and for some reason, the house that her and her sisters inherit can't be sold, but they can live there, and so they go back to live there. But the reason that she's been not taking her husband there and has been estranged from them is that her parents were murdered in that house, and everyone believes she was actually the murderer when she was younger. So I don't know whether this will actually fall into like horror thriller, but I have read like it's a bit of a haunted house deal. I love that. It's a bit of sort of family reconnecting and sisterhood, and I really like that. So I think this will be my first try for a Kate Alice Marshall adult book.
Nice. That sounds good.
Yeah. And then February, one of these is not like the other. These are, I didn't have a graphic novel or comic for this one actually, but I'm sure I do. But these were the top three that came to mind, and they're all prose. So An Education in Malice is, if I remember right, it's actually a Carmilla retelling. We love that, in a small liberal arts college in Massachusetts, in like rural Massachusetts, dark academia, which almost never works for me, but I always want it to. So we'll see where that sort of lands us. And then the How You Get the Girl is Anita Kelly. I've read two of Anita Kelly's other books. Their first book was Love and Other Disasters, the cooking show one with one of the leads was non-binary. I really love that one. I know I've recommended it to you. I don't know. Have you read that one yet?
No, it's just sitting on my shelf.
You have it though from Book of the Month.
Yeah, it was a Book of the Month pick, and I never picked it up. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one when you get to it. No pressure, but I did really enjoy it enough to obviously recommend it to people. And then I'm trying to remember the title of Anita's second book. That one was a male-male romance, and it involved hiking. And I was like, oh, I liked Anita Kelly. I love hiking. And it kind of fell flat for me. It was sort of middling. There was a lot of content around healing from religious trauma, which I think is really important to depict in books. But I kind of wasn't expecting it to be tackling the topics it did. And I don't think I was in the right headspace to, read something like that. And so we'll see where this lands. I'm kind of nervous. I hope it falls closer to Love and Other Disasters so I can keep sort of following the author, but I'm a little nervous that it will not wind up that way. But this is a high school basketball team. One of them is the coach, and she gets a player on her team that is kind of causing a lot of trouble, really difficult. She goes to talk to that player's parent. It turns out it's her foster parent, and they have some kind of romance between the coach and the foster parent. So I think they both were college basketball players. So yay, sports romance, I guess. I'm kind of excited about that. And then We Ate the Dark, I bookmarked because I can never remember the plot of this, why it's on my list. This is also adult. Some of the tags are horror, gothic, thriller, mystery, queer. It's four women investigating the haunting murder of their friend, discover more than they ever imagined in a terrifying novel about good and evil, love and death, and the spaces in between. I have read, surprisingly, 2 YA books where the plot of the book is a group of friends solve the disappearance or murder of their friend. One was like a World War II one, and one was a very modern, like Gen Z one. And I really liked both of them. So it turns out I love that trope. If any of our friends get murdered, I can't wait to bond with you and learn about the secrets they left behind. But what's piquing me here is it's adult. Have tried to read more adult genre work in the last couple of years. And so I think An Education in Malice is also adult, actually. And I don't know if this makes sense. It will to you probably, but if you're somebody who's consumed BookTube a lot for a while, I feel like so many of these like good genre books, particularly if they have queer elements, are almost always YA. I feel like a lot of adult books like that wind up being kind of literary fiction. So I'm kind of excited because both of these don't seem at all like they're going to have a lot of literary fiction, which again is just not my thing personally. It's no shade against it. So February is about to be, maybe I should save How You Get the Girl because February is about to be dark, I think, with both of these.
It's true.
But yeah, so those are my February releases that I'm excited for.
Again, those sound great. I really like the cover for We Ate the Dark.
Isn't it cool?
I like the creepy weird house with the that's me.
But I think it's like now, like with these romances where they all look like cartoons on the cover.
Yeah, it's totally a trope at this point. Yeah,
yeah, and the
like
house
common
with the
theme.
well, the house with the roots coming out of it is also that, because I saw that book. Maybe you or Mary actually might have talked about it on the Thursday reading update, but there's one called Hide, I think. Oh, it was when you all were looking at best books that had just come out, best horror.
Yeah.
And it's got like a Ferris wheel maybe, and it's the exact same design, and I'm like, what are we doing here? Are they all from the same publisher? Like, or are they different? And can you sue if they're different? I don't know. Just so interesting.
Yeah. There's stuff I feel like that happens every year, especially with romance. You see that, and thrillers as well. It's like, okay, there's always going to be a house, and it's going to be dark, and it's going to be creepy.
Yeah. And I'm always going to read it. So like, it works.
It works. They're like, this worked once. Let's go.
Let's go. Yeah. Lots to look forward to in the winter.
And this is a great, important comment.
Yes.
Needing more kind books. That's so true.
It's so true.
So true.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, we can dive into our 2 reads, and we will always start with the Gold Star segment. So don't have to worry about spoilers. Not this book, not that book.
I was like, why are you holding that one?
Because I was going to reference it when we talked about the other one. Let's do it again. Can you tell it's finale time? Can you
Here we go.
Yeah. Oh, you have the hardcover El Deafo.
It's the super-powered edition.
Oh, that's beautiful. What's the like bonus content in that?
I think it's, hold on. Let's see. This special edition includes 40 pages of all new material, childhood photographs, early sketches, notes from Cece, and much more.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's cool. Yeah, mine is from the library. Again, support your local.
What do you
library.
Want to start with?
Let's start with El Deafo.
Okay.
Because this one came out way before the other one.
It did. I don't even know. What year was this?
This book has been on my, like, I have to get to this list since I started regularly reading comics and graphic novels like 11 years ago.
Nice.
And I've had so many opportunities to pick it up. So I was really glad that you picked it, because it was the impetus. It's not one that you're like pulling off the shelf, so many years after it came out. I think the hype had died down, etc.
Sure.
And so it was great to have a reason to read it, I guess, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. Also, I don't have a year in this because it's only telling me when this version was published, which was 2020.
Well, I think it was 2014, I think, because it says the text and illustrations were copyrighted in 2014 by CC
That makes
Bell.
sense. It's so weird. I don't even have that in here. It's just like, this is published here.
Yeah, that is kind of weird.
Yeah, good to know.
They both have, I emailed you, Kristen. I'm wondering if we could either put them in the comments or maybe in the description later. Both of these books have really good YouTube videos. CC Bell's channel on YouTube has a deep dive for each chapter. So she shows some of the process, some of the thoughts behind each chapter. Really, I've watched the first 3. They were good. I actually hope to finish them sometime this week. And then Laura Gao has had several great interviews about this book, but I found one that was close to one I attended live by the University of Kentucky, where Laura does, I didn't know how this was going to work, and it was so cool. They read from the book. So you know how like authors will read a chapter? I was like, how's this going to work with a comic or graphic novel? And it was such a cool experience. I hope that more authors start doing that and just kind of take a snippet and talk through the process and point things out that you may not notice. So I emailed you both of them. Hopefully we can put them somewhere so people can watch them if they want.
For sure.
Deep dives into both.
For sure. So El Deafo. The name comes from CC Bell. Again, this is a graphic memoir. It's actually her story about her life. When she was a child, she got meningitis and caused her to go deaf. So she was in the hospital, and then they realized, I think she was 4. They realized that she was hard of hearing and needed a hearing aid, which is what you see here. Yeah.
Yeah, here's her at the hospital.
It's better. There we go. So you get to learn her story from when she was a small child, going through that, and then needing this very big hearing aid called the phonic ear. And yeah, I'm trying to find that
Here's
too.
a picture.
There we go.
Well, oh, this was cool. They showed her tests.
Oh yeah.
Like a real depiction of the test.
Yeah, that's like a real image of her test, which is awesome.
There's the hearing.
There we go. So in her head, she calls herself El Defo because she's like, I'm a superhero. I've got like, you know, this awesome hearing aid that lets me hear like everything, which is how that title came about. And that's something that she talks about at the end too. That's a real thing. You know, obviously this is a graphic memoir. Some things, as always, are, I don't know what I'm trying to say. Like, I can't get the word. Are
direct adaptations, loosely inspired by
more dramatic. What am I trying to say?
Oh, okay. I'm not sure.
Embellished? I don't know.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
More highly dramatized.
For entertainment purposes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But that is something direct. I mean, there's a lot of direct things when you read the ends in here, which is awesome. She also, of course, as you can see, depicts everybody as like bunny people. Like, which I think is cute. And this will be shelved in the kids section at your local library. And it is very, I think, accessible to a younger audience as well. And I think having these characters depicted as rabbits or bunnies does help as well.
It's giving Arthur.
Absolutely, it's 100%. 100%.
Even the art
DJ,
style.
100%. Yeah. That's funny you say Arthur, by the way. Just sidebar. We went to Dollar Tree the other day, and I saw the most creepy little stuffed Arthur that I had to have.
Oh, a stuffed Arthur.
I had to have. Just look at him.
Oh. You know what's the creepiest is his outfit for some reason.
It just cracked me up, and I was like, I need it so bad. I had to get it.
Also, doesn't Arthur wear shoes?
Doesn't
he have those red shoes?
I think he does wear shoes.
Is that licensed, or is his name like Albert or something like that?
Licensed.
Wow.
Got the logo and everything. There was also a DJ. She was horrifying. I couldn't get her.
Oh God. Okay.
But I like this weird little Arthur. I had to
love it.
Anyway.
Wow. Dollar Tree. Interesting.
Yeah, what else was I saying? I don't know. I can't even talk words today.
Oh, you were just given the setup, and it's probably obvious by the device that she uses, but this is, you know, in real life, CC Bell, I think, is in her 60s right now, so this mostly takes place in the 70s. She might be in her late 50s, actually, or mid 50s. Can I do math? No, I cannot. Please do not ask me to do so. But it was part of her loving El Defo, of course, was also she loved watching TV and superheroes, and loved watching Adam West's Batman. And I thought that was so cute. And she said something in one of the deep dives that I listened to that I thought was just so interesting, which is she feels she became a more creative storyteller because when she's following these things, she can't always follow them very closely, because, for example, if it's a cartoon, their mouths don't actually match what they're saying, so when she's lip reading, she has to fill in the blanks, I guess, a lot in all the media she consumed, soap operas or whatever. So she was sharing that, like, she thinks it made her a more creative storyteller because she's basically had to be telling herself a story to connect the two things. And I thought that was a really interesting or an insightful comment she made, sort of reflecting where that came from. And she is a great visual storyteller. That was like a main standout for me. I wanted to show one because we're still early in here, which is the way she takes advantage of the medium when she's misunderstanding things or mishearing things, I suppose. She is like showing what the person is saying and then what she's hearing. So like here she's being offered a cherry pop, like a cherry soda, but what she's hearing is like Jerry mop, right? Or like here you can see orange juice, but she's like hearing orange juice, things like that. And I thought that was a great little use of the medium. I really enjoyed that part of it.
Absolutely. And you think about, when she's a kid during this, which, like you said, was in the 70s or something. And when she's watching TV, especially, we think now everything has subtitles that you can add on, which is great. but back then, not so much, so, or at all, I guess. So you think about like
Mm-hmm.
how she loved watching cartoons, but she couldn't follow what was going on necessarily. She made a reference to like Tom and Jerry and how there's no talking during that, so she could really follow like those
Mm-hmm.
sort of cartoons, which was just kind of cute to think about. Like, yay, she had something that she could at least follow along with.
Yeah, she had I tabbed this because I thought it was so cute. There were just so many details in the art that I thought were genuinely some of the best parts of the book. But this one was she was talking about how she followed not only lips but the emotions of the characters. So she was like, "Hey, doctor shows were kind of impossible because they're wearing
Mm.
masks." But also she was watching Star Trek, and when it came to Spock, she couldn't really follow because he doesn't change his expression. It's just
Yeah.
emotionless. The emotionless mumbler is what she called him. And I thought that was just so cute. There were so many little things like that.
Yeah, I love that.
Um, but yeah, so this kind of follows her. I don't know, she's 4, like you said, and then I think it goes up through like the start of middle school or end of elementary
Yeah.
school about. Um, what were some of your favorite parts as of the book or just as a whole, like the standout qualities for you?
Yeah, well, I haven't let's see, I read this probably back when it came out, from the library back then, and this is a copy that I received, a few years ago for Christmas,
Mm-hmm.
from my mother-in-law, actually, who
Oh,
read this before she gave it to me.
I love
She's like,
that.
"I read it, and I thought it was really nice." I was like, "Wow," which is wild because she doesn't read comics.
I
Um,
love that.
yeah, so that's just a sidebar. That was really cute. But I saw they were coming out with a special edition. I wanted it, and I think it really does, just to show you some of the background. Like, it
Yeah.
adds nicely to the story. She shows like actual photographs of her back then. You get to see like what her hearing aid looked like in real pictures. She shows that this is actually the audio test she took. And there's some other like just interesting thing. Yeah, and you just see like again actual photographs from her back then, and how great the cartooning is to like depict her as well. Like, it's like, oh, she looks like, obviously these are like anthropomorphic animals,
Yeah.
but um,
Yeah, this
it's
is her with the device on, and I
yeah,
totally agree. That is what she looks like
yeah,
somehow. That's
absolutely, right.
correct. Yeah. Yeah,
And
it's
this was cute
crazy.
too. Like, she during this book, she has a crush on a neighbor named Mike Miller.
Mhm.
So she actually shows the real Mike Miller here.
Ah,
And
I
then
love that.
and then under it, this is her and Mike Miller many years later, and she talks about Mike moved away when we were in the 10th grade, but we reunited 30 years later. Here we are modeling the phonic ear and microphone in San Diego. Lots
Oh
of
my
readers want to
gosh.
know, did we get married? No, we did not, but we are still friends, which I think is super cute,
That
right?
is super cute.
So just like little bits, um, like she has report cards in here, like early sketches from the book and different cover art that she didn't use. Actual like scenes and like schools depicted in here, like she goes back to and like
Mm.
takes photos and stuff. It's super interesting. So I would recommend, if you want a deeper dive and you want a nice hardcover edition, the Superpowered edition is absolutely worth it.
Yeah, I love process stuff like that, especially if it's not. I mean, I like process sketches. I hope this doesn't come across as dismissive, but I personally get a lot more into the storytelling piece of things. And so I like things like that. And I've watched the first 3 chapter deep dives on her channel, and she's got like that bunny and that Eeyore like that are in the book. She shows them. She like has them in her house. So
That's
I totally
awesome.
agree. You could just tell it was really not just personal, but well thought out in that way. And it is like so simple, I guess. The line works really simple. It's like you said, the target audience is children, and it's very accessible in that way. But it was cool that even then she was able to make it be and feel very authentic, I think, anyways. Um, and that comes across, I think, when you look at that more deep dive material.
Absolutely.
Um, any other thoughts that are non spoilery overall?
Yeah, I think if anyone like listening or hasn't read this, it does give a nice, and she makes comments about it at the end, like, this is my experience, like all deaf people like have different experiences, obviously. She's like, this is very much mine and how I felt about things and what I did and my preferred ways to communicate, etc. And I think, if I think any of us hearing people could use something like this just to gain perspective, right? Because even rereading this and, being able to visually see the words, how she hears them when someone is like turning away or like whispering, I do think about, and not to bring up Big Brother all the time,
no,
but
I did too.
I do think about Matt in Big Brother and how he talked about whispering and how that was so hard for him to deal with. And, just in hearing that from him and he just talked about it, it felt more, I don't know, I feel like I was able to understand it as much as I can more after having read this. I'm like, okay, yeah, that would suck in many ways. And, and again, I read this many years ago, but to reread it now and to be able to understand a different perspective than your own, I think that alone, I love that this exists, especially kids can pull it off a shelf. But I do think more people generally, if anyone watching hasn't read it, I think it's a good, nice thing for you to read outside of maybe something you understand at all, right? Just to gain more perspective for how other experiences are. And that was really nice to see, especially, again, all the extra stuff at the end, probably her YouTube channel. I want to go and watch those now. I didn't even know it existed. So it's very interesting and I'm glad it exists.
Yeah, I also thought about Matt from Big Brother, who had trouble with the whispering. And I agree, there were little things I didn't even think of, like she's at a sleepover at one point and they want to talk with the lights out. This is like something every child who's had a sleepover, like that's when the good stuff happens. And she even says that she's like leaning in, she's like, oh, it's about to get good, get some good gossip. And they turn out the lights and she's can't do anything at all, you know what I mean? Or like when she is having, I think it's a different sleepover actually later on, and she turns off her hearing aid, and the other person doesn't know that and then figures it out and gets angry, like why would you do that? And there were just so many like etiquette things, I guess, I didn't think about too. But I totally agree. I know we've talked about this, but I was really reflecting a lot on the word empathy when I was reading both of these. And you and I have talked about how actually graphic memoirs or graphic nonfiction isn't usually a hit for me. It usually always goes, I love it, or I just don't feel like it should have existed, or I didn't get anything out of it, or I don't know. And I think these two both are good examples, but certainly this one in what empathy actually means. And I think as reading through this, there was so much relatable content. Growing up, socialized as a little girl in this country, it was me. So like 15, 20 years later, probably from when her childhood was or more, so many relatable things, the pranks, the sleepovers, the pettiness, the getting nervous and hyping up. I was looking at this again, the first date, she's got like this picture and then it's like over in 2 seconds. Like all of this is so relatable, but you're right. It lets you relate on this emotional core level. But it has these extra layers about her being deaf and all of these extra things, or living in a different time period. And you can learn a lot from that. But the truth is, like, empathy is a two-way street. It isn't always about understanding all of the circumstances, but it's about like making the effort to make that emotional core connection. And because you have that, there's a desire then to learn about all of these things because you care about that person on like this heart to heart sort of level. And I just am so grateful that graphic memoirs exist. And this one particularly, like, I just can't think of growing up any depictions of deafness really, other than learning about Helen Keller, which is, we'd have to read, those little biographical books. But now kids these days have so many stories that can show them both lives that are very different from theirs, but ones that they can relate to. And there's something about that message. There's something about like, this person's nothing like me and their circumstances aren't, but I get what they're feeling. Like I can relate to some of that emotion. And I'm grateful that people are willing to share their stories to make people feel seen. But then also, you know, for people who are hearing, that you can then learn and have that empathy and just be more culturally humble in that sense. You don't have to know everything, but being mindful about where these differences can happen, the spirit of humility in that, I think, is also really valuable. So yeah, I maybe I am a graphic memoir girly. I don't know.
You just got to find the right ones.
Yeah, well, I don't always pick winners. Yeah. Any things you didn't love about this one, or downsides?
I have nothing. I really don't. I
Wow,
have nothing at
good.
all. I thought it was the perfect length. I'm finding no downsides.
Wow. Okay.
It sounds like you have some.
No, I just have one, which is
Okay.
the length. I thought I felt
Really?
for me, yeah, it dragged just a little in the middle for me. I need to reread it because I was really trying to think of usually what pulls me through something like this where it's vignettes told over time, which kind of our other read was sort of like that as well, is what's the narrative through line. And I felt like for me, this one just lost it a little bit here and there. And I was like, what is the through line here? Like, why is this story also important to show? And sometimes I couldn't, it got a little muddled for me. And I think when I read for younger readers, I can't help but put myself in the position of a younger reader. And on the one hand, little Jessica may have loved having a lot to go through, but for people who are a little more reticent about reading, the length may have been a little bit of a downside for those kids when I compare it to some other things. But to be fair, like Diary of a Wimpy Kid's easily one of the most popular of all time, right? And this is probably the length of one of those books. So that was really my only downside. I totally agree. I think everyone should give this a read. I don't care what age you are or if you like graphic memoirs or not.
Yeah,
I think
I
it's
agree.
so good. So yeah. What's your star rating for El Deafo?
You know, back when I read it, I gave it a 5. I still give it a 5.
We love consistency.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's probably like a 4.5. I think, like I said, it's a little bit longer in the middle for me. It wasn't something that I was like loving consistently. It was something I enjoyed always. And at the end, I really did love it quite a bit. So I would put it maybe in that 4.5 range.
Awesome.
But I'm so glad that we read it. I can say that for sure.
For sure. Well, non-spoilery of Messy Roots now?
Messy Roots. Not American born Chinese. Yeah.
Yeah. Hello Crazed and
Hey,
Hello
Crazed.
Hayden. Good to see both.
So Messy Roots was I think it was my first comics graphic novel read of the year, and one of my first reads of the year. I think I let you know I got this from the library, fresh into the year. You know, you have all your reading goals.
Yeah.
And it's cold, and my engine takes a while to warm up. So I was warming my engine up. I was like, I'm going to start the book. And then I don't know what happened. I just looked up like 45 minutes later. I was still in the parking lot and I finished it, returned it, and then ordered my own hard copy. And then, not in a bragging way, but in a way that was just really cool, I was like, Maddie, you have to read this. I really want you to read this. And one aspect of Maddie's old job was putting on some programming at the university here. And I was like, can you get Laura Gao? Because Maddie's department works a lot with study abroad students and then also Asian American students, or her old job, I should say. And so she was able to get Laura Gao. So that was really cool to have Laura do a talk and answer questions about the book. So that was midpoint of the year. And then here I am rereading it. So 2023 has been a year of Messy Roots, but essentially the setup here. Oh, and I will note Laura Gao, the author, uses she, her, and they, them. So we can use those interchangeably for them. Might be important to note the character. This is obviously a graphic memoir, uses she, her, I think, throughout the whole book, if I remember correctly. But just noting that for future conversations about them. But this is essentially a reflection that opens up in 2020, the start of the pandemic, and a big spike in what is continuing ongoing hate crimes and violence and dangerous rhetoric around Asian Americans in the US. And it just so happens that Laura's family actually immigrated from Wuhan. And so that's where we open up. And then she kind of takes you back from her childhood in Wuhan to moving to Texas, to going to college in Pennsylvania, and then eventually finding work in San Francisco, which is where the book opens up. And then kind of catches you back up, I guess you could say, to 2020. So that's essentially the plot. The title obviously refers to her roots in many ways, where she's lived, but also the people she's encountered, her experiences, etc. Because a side plot of this, other than her thinking about China, is she's also in a process of figuring out her own sexuality and a little bit of the tease of the gender identity stuff that later plays a role in her life. So that's what this book is about. But Kristen, this was your first time reading, and I'd love to hear some of your non-spoilery thoughts about Messy Roots.
Yeah, it's one I grabbed from the library before a few times. And
I've seen the graveyard of library books at Christine's house.
It's not good.
It's
so I'm glad I finally had an excuse to actually read it, for sure. I really liked her cartooning throughout. It was very kind of chaotic in some sections, which I appreciated. You know, like there's no panel borders at all. Everything is like, it's very, very interchangeable. Like it'll go from something like this, which is certainly more standard, to like, now I can't find a good example. I don't know, something like this, right? There are many backgrounds throughout. I don't think that's necessary even. I appreciated her cartooning throughout this. I really liked it.
Yeah, I agree. There's like one that's a bit more paneling and one that's a bit more open.
Yeah.
And the coloring was also very like different and interesting. And it changes throughout the book a lot depending on where she's at. Although she pretty much always has this red shirt on.
Yeah. I wonder how often she actually wears this red shirt.
She loves this red shirt. I should have asked that question.
Yeah. And even like moments like this. Which we're seeing a lot of like her inner thoughts and things like that. I really liked how it was set up like that. I think to have a really loosey-goosey kind of way of storytelling, which I feel like we had as well, with the paneling, with the cartooning, but also in subject matter. I thought it was like the chapters were broken up very well in that regard, but it also didn't, she wasn't like limited to, this is how I want to do this. Like, I'm just going to do this my own way, which I appreciated.
Yeah, and both of these, I just thought of that. I didn't really think about it till you said it. Both of these actually say like chapter 1, chapter 2, but you don't, even in other graphic memoirs, it's not like the standard. So that's interesting.
It's really not.
We both picked things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I kind of liked, it's like, okay, with prose, we talk about this sometimes. I want a short chapter. And I feel like these both actually had pretty short chapters that I really appreciated because it made me feel like I was making progress.
Yep.
Which I liked. There was also a really good, I like to point this out when it happens because it can be very not well done or even not used at all. But she very much like incorporated social media in a really like nice way, in a really modern way. And it didn't feel like, oh, we're going to read this in 5 years and it's going to feel like extra dated,
Although it's not called that anymore. And that's not the logo. So maybe we did read it in less than 5 years.
But like, it's always going to be called that in my heart.
I know.
I'm never going to say X.
I did think about it though when I was reading it. I was like, oh, that's funny that this is dated and it just came out like 3 years ago.
Although if I was putting out my graphic memoir right now, I would call it Twitter and I would use a little bird logo. Because nobody's trying to call it X. I'm just saying.
And you would, because your cats are Twitter famous, so it would actually feature in your graphic.
Like, that's weird.
X famous feels not like a good thing you want to be.
Right? It sounds bad. Let's see. How did this? I'm going back to. I like the ending. I won't talk about it, but I did wonder. I was like, how is this going to like wrap up? You know, especially because we are more modern. We're not. She does go back in time. We see like some of her childhood and everything, but we are set a lot of it like somewhat current day, right?
Yeah.
And I think it wrapped up very nicely at the end. So I liked it a lot. I feel like I know I enjoy a graphic memoir when I can read it and be like, I haven't read another graphic memoir like this. And I feel like that's absolutely how I felt after El Deafo. Even years later, reading it again, and I've read a lot of graphic memoirs, and absolutely want to say the same thing about this one. You know, and that to me, I'm like, okay, you did something for the reader that they haven't experienced before.
Kristen, I love that you said this point because I've had, you've heard my rambling voice memo podcast where I'm like, I cannot find the right words. I have 100 words and none of them are correct about what I'm trying to think of. And you and I talked a little bit about this when I read, I think it's called American Cults or whatever, which is about cults in America, which is a subject I'm super interested in. But I just finished it and I was like, it wasn't bad. I'm not like going, don't read this book. It's whatever. Like, not at all. But I just was like, I could have read a Wikipedia summary of these things and I would have gotten honestly more from this. And I've been often asking myself the question, like, if you're going to tell a nonfiction story, if you're going to tell even like a memoir, a biography, what is the point of choosing a graphic medium if you don't take advantage of it? Like if you don't take full advantage of it. And I don't mean it always has to be comic style where they're like talking bubbles. I actually think there can be certainly nonfiction where you get these kind of like texts, right? Like the what's going on. But there's still a way of using the visual medium where I'm like, oh, that's why you chose this versus writing like a short novel or a children's book about this. And I hope I don't sound ragey, but like it does annoy me because it feels tedious, I guess, because you get so excited like, oh, this is a medium I love and I like nonfiction. And I want these two things to come together in a way that's offering me something exactly what you said, like I haven't seen before. So this really, thank you for saying that, because it just crystallizes how I've been feeling a lot and why certain graphic memoirs maybe work more for me than others. So I love the way you said that. I love that. I agree. I think I just felt like it was so creative. Even rereading it, I was like, there are so many creative things in the way she's telling stories that were both funny, fun, and educational, and sometimes all three at once. You see tons of things like here she's in Chinese school and she's like, hey, I learned these characters because I'd make up a story about them and then draw it here. Like,
yeah, that was really cool.
It was cool to see. It was fun. It was educational, and it created a sense of like understanding of what a kid who's struggling to connect with their culture like this. One thing this kid loves is like, you see, she has a love for graphic novels and comics. And so she combines those two because that makes the most sense for her. And so I don't know. I just think again, you couldn't necessarily do this in quite the same way in prose. And so it's just an example of like, I'm going to take advantage of that. And I also think even though there were these descriptive blocks, I think as messy as it is, her storytelling, just the visuals are so clear. She could have not used words on a lot of these pages and I would have known exactly what was going on because she's so creative.
How messy that it is. I see what she did there.
She's meta. It's meta. It's a meta.
And that's true. Like some of this cartooning does feel messy and, like I said, chaotic. And I think that reflects what she's showing as well, though. You know, like they truly go hand in hand.
Yeah, and it's worth noting. Actually, I don't think I said this at the top. So this is Laura Gow's debut, and they were actually solicited to make this book, not necessarily the other way around entirely. I'm trying to remember the name of the comic. It was a web comic she was publishing even going into the pandemic that was about her life in Wuhan. And then it just sort of all synergized because she also was like trying to work on some memoir-ish things. And then these offers all came together to produce what is Messy Roots. So this really is like, if in a way, even though she's been drawing her whole life, this is her earliest professional work is a way I think about it. because it's very much in the style of the webcomic, which you can still see some of online. I will note, she said that her publisher actually, they solicited 3 books. So this is the first of 3, but the next one is going to be fiction and potentially fantasy. So I'm so excited to see how her art changes and evolves. And also like what that kind of storytelling looks like. Because this, like El Defo, feels so real to me. Like it feels very real, honest, and authentic. You just get that authenticity all the way through. That's how I felt.
Yeah, there's something raw about it. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't
absolutely.
feel. I'm sure, like I said, any graphic memoir, we're probably changing some little things here and there, but it still doesn't feel like that,
No, she said she changed the names at the beginning of, I think, pretty much everybody in the book. And I can say from interviews I've heard with her, I mentioned that, well, I'll mention this in spoilers, but I'll just say that she did let some people know they were going to be depicted and sent them like excerpts of how they were going to be depicted. Cause I'm always curious about that, especially when that person's like not having their best moment, like, do you let them know? But to be fair, there's an example that we can talk about in spoilers where she doesn't come across great. And she's real honest about that. And I think that honesty was important as well. Overall thoughts, themes that you enjoyed or things you thought could have been done better, especially being a debut?
I really like how when, especially with her family, when they're not speaking English, like the bubbles are blue, like they're light blue. That was nice to see. Because everyone always does that differently, but I liked that.
She also sometimes puts the Chinese. There's a Chinese or Mandarin, I can't remember. Characters. I don't know. Yeah, you can kind of see it there.
Yeah, that was cool too.
Yeah.
We do get her dealing with her culture, obviously, and that's a big theme throughout it. And trying to find that within herself, as well as dealing with her sexuality and what that feels like and looks like within that culture as well, which was interesting to see how that developed.
Yeah, and that was another thing I just thought felt honest. Like in El Defo, I was like, oh, I've had sleepovers like this. I also had this moment where she's visiting her cousins in Wuhan after they've already lived in the States, just like her stateside. High School Musical was the big thing. And 2 of her cousins are just hanging out, and one of them's like, oh, wasn't Troy so cute? And she said, yeah, and Gabriella too. And they don't like blink at it at all.
Yeah.
But I just thought like, oh, that was such a realistic and honest moment. Or another moment that sticks out, I remember this, is where her friends are changing in the locker room because she plays basketball. And she's kind of like blushing and looking away. She's like, I shouldn't be looking at this. Whereas all the other girls are just sort of changing around each other. They're not thinking twice. And that was something that it wasn't until I was an adult, I was like, yeah, I was really weird about that. And now I understand why I was weird about that. And so I just thought there were so many moments where they don't really dwell on it, right? But it is a through line. When she's in college, the sexuality thing really comes to a head, which again, we can save some of the specifics for in spoilers. But I do like that it was seated there. And I love books that are really intersectional because it's all interrelated, right? But there's no reason to separate yourself out, right? To tell this story that's just about the pandemic and just about, honoring your roots without also including who you are and what that looks like through the prism of this other experience. I love books that have really interesting intersections that I haven't seen before.
Absolutely. And hello, Bar.
Hey, Bar.
So what is your rating?
Oh, it's 5 stars. It was 5 stars then, and it's 5 stars now. I'll just say this is why I raised it. American-born Chinese is mentioned in this book. Jean Yun Yang was blurbed on this book and has spoken about this book, which freaked Laura out because he's like her idol. She was reading this and feeling seen as a child. And I'm really excited that a teenager can read this and feel seen and have that same experience. So these go hand in hand. They also both use direct depictions and also some fantastical elements in their storytelling, which I think is cool. And El Defo did that as well to great effect. So this is another 5-star read for me. But just to say, if you liked this, like, you would love this. And this is one that I've gifted to many people and will just keep preaching about forever. Read Messy Roots if you haven't. But what do you think?
I agree. I mean, it was a 5-star for me. Absolutely. Speaking of blurbs on the back, Becky Albertalli blurbed it, who you recall the summer reading program, she was featured. Which was fun.
She wrote Imogen, obviously, and has a massive back catalog. Imogen, obviously, was not her debut.
Yeah. Also, Tilly Walden blurbed it on the back. Yeah. So we love seeing that.
What was cool too, R.F. Kuang, who writes fantasy prose, like there's a lot of range. And I know this book just it came out at the right time. And so I worried actually that like when I reread it, it would feel less timely in a sense, but I definitely feel like it has a timeless quality about it. But I know that's why it got so much hype.
Also, look at us picking red spines.
Oh, well, mine's blue. But
oh, well.
They still look nice together though. Beautiful. I'll have to find a copy. El Defo, I see this at half price books literally all the time. So I'll definitely pick up a copy when there's a good price. But if you read it, let us know, or either one of them, let us know what you think out of 5 or some of your favorite or least favorite parts. But we're going to move into the book report. We're going to talk spoilers. So if you don't want to know spoilers, hop out now. I will say these are graphic memoirs. So in some ways, I don't know that you should really worry about spoilers, but fair warning, we will probably pick out a few things that we couldn't discuss in the non-spoiler. Which for El Defo, I don't know. Was there anything that you didn't want to like talk about or show explicitly?
It's so hard. I don't think so. Can you think of anything?
Yeah, there are just 2 things that I could think about that I was kind of saving. The first one was there's an interesting conversation in here, and I personally didn't know a lot about it. So again, love getting to read other people's experiences different than my own. Which was her mom takes her to, so she had some language abilities and understood some words, of course, before losing her hearing. So she, as you pointed out, she has a great afterword. And it's in this version as well, the afterword. That's like, this was my experience, literally changed one aspect, like when the deafness happened or what have you. And it would be a totally different story, right, for somebody else. And I also appreciated that. But she has this own battle, I guess you could say, in her mind and heart around learning sign language or reading lips. And to bring back Big Brother, that was also something I thought was so interesting. Matt, who was a contestant on the US season this last year, said his parents really encouraged the lip reading because then he wouldn't be locked out of conversation with as many people, right? If you only are knowing sign language, you do have a limited audience that in person you can communicate with back and forth. You know, I mean, you can add like writing on paper or texting or what have you. But so in this story, her mom takes her to this local Episcopal church that is doing sign language classes and she hates them. And she talks about how she's like, I feel like I don't like that people assume that I speak sign language. I don't like that sign language draws attention because like they're eating at a restaurant at one point and there's a couple conversing in sign language or American Sign Language, I should say. And then the other people in the restaurant are looking at them. She's like, I don't want that to be me. And her mom was just trying, right, to like be helpful. But this was her experience. And I just thought that was really interesting along with Matt's story. I just never thought about that being a decision that has so many factors, like how deaf are you? In this case, she's profoundly deaf, I think is how she describes it in the videos. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't know if you had given much thought to that before you read it, but I don't know. It was just a conversation I never thought about. And I especially wonder what that conversation sounds like with people in the community amongst each other. Cause you know, those look different to what's acceptable to then talk about with people who are hearing might be different.
Yeah, for sure. And again, also thought about Matt.
Yeah. Where it was like, great because representation is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that, you know, Matt's experience too is something that we don't see depicted on television a lot.
No.
You know, he's speaking and reading lips a lot. I don't think we ever see him use sign language throughout the show. So it's certainly, yeah, it's something I hadn't really thought about it either. That I think is an interesting, important thing that she's bringing up. And I would, you know, when I read something like this, I'm like, okay, we need more graphic memoirs that depict these various experiences that we don't see depicted.
Mm-hmm. And like she said, this book, we could have this book from somebody else taking place in a different decade when different technology was available, etc., having that same decision to make or conversation. And the factors are going to be different because it's taking place in a different time. And it would all be so new to us because it isn't our lived experience, nor the lived experience of anyone we're so close to that we could understand it in that way. So I will say she does talk about how a lot of people think American Sign Language is limited, right? Because you're using, you know, a limited amount of symbols. But she goes on to dispel. She's like, that's not true. There's a lot of nuance. And she even shows a couple of examples, like in the story, not in this like commentary way. So that was good storytelling.
Absolutely.
The only other thing I didn't bring up was her different friends and how they all reacted to her deafness. But also how she was in a different place, mental state, to have the capacity to explain things to them or not feel she should or should have to explain things to them. I just thought that was also really interesting. I hope that makes sense. But, you know, people don't owe us explanations if their experience is different than ours. Certainly not. But, you know, there are times in your life where you have the capacity for and you have the willingness to explain things to friends where you're going through something that's not their lived experience. And then there are other times that you just can't. And sometimes when you just can't, I think you do come across, and in my opinion, she came across a couple of times as sort of rude, like even for a child, like, girl, you need to be, you know, but I think that was so important because it was important to depict that that's how it comes across sometimes. But that's because you're asking someone who is in an oppressed group, a disadvantaged group, etc., to do extra labor so that you can feel more comfortable. And so I kind of like that she was sort of a jerk in like a couple examples, I think, in this book. But I mean to say she came across like a jerk, but you know that what's going on the inside. And I think that was important to depict, especially for any kid, because you have these conflicts with each other. And it's, again, a practice in empathy. Like you might have a bad day with your friend. They may say something that hurts your feelings, like when you're younger or when you're older. But it's important to note that that's not all you, right? That's coming from somewhere else. And I really appreciated that aspect of it, especially for middle schoolers and early high school where they're still learning that, I really think, because they're so mentally always in their own spotlight. That's just how child development works. So I really liked that aspect of it.
Absolutely. I agree. And one random thing that I just want to bring up.
Yeah.
So, you know, we obviously spend a lot of time with the phonic ear, and she has to bring this microphone to her teachers every day, and they wear it around their neck, and then she can hear everything. And that's where the El Deafo character comes in. But the darn gym teacher who drops the microphone and breaks it causes a horrible like sound in her ears. And then it's just like, whoops. I'm like, I was so mad at him the whole time. I'm just like, now this thing's going to be gone. She's going to have troubles. And you're not even going to pay for it, sir. Like, I was like upset about that.
Yeah, that part was, yep. And I was also thinking when you were telling another funny part that it's spoilery, I guess, because it's comedic relief that you don't want to see coming, which is when I think it's the first teacher that's using it, and she's like, and I could hear this, and I could hear this, and I can hear, some of them's like good, like she's telling other students off. She's like, oh, I like hearing that, or she's gossiping with her coworkers, love that. But then she also doesn't turn it off when she goes to use the restroom, and she's like, I didn't need to hear that. Things like that.
Yeah.
I will say, watching those YouTube videos, CC Bell is such an adorable human being, like so genuine and like approachable. Like that is just the vibe she gives off, and it adds charm when I go to reread this. I think to have seen how she grows up and who she grows up to be, I think it really adds to it. But yeah. Messy Roots spoilers, thoughts, moments.
Well, I mean, can we jump to the end?
Absolutely.
That's
Should
what
we?
pops up in my head.
Yeah. Let me hear what you're thinking about the end. Yes.
So I wonder how it was going to end.
Mm-hmm.
And what it like. Yeah, I was going to say, really, the cover is kind of this end page here, right?
Yep. Beautiful.
Which I like a lot. Yeah, I thought this was
Oh
super
yeah.
well done, and I like how it all came together. And you know, we say it a lot. Endings obviously can make or break a book, but I really like how it ended.
Yeah, I wanted to read it if it's okay, just the few sentences she
Yeah.
says, because as we talked about, the bulk of the book, and I have a few funny things I'll talk about, but the bulk of the book is like, how did I get from here to there? And it's like full circle. We start in 2020, we roughly end in 2020. And she writes, when she's reflecting on her roots, one of the events that's having her reflecting is she goes back home. She hasn't seen her parents in a couple of years. Her mom has undergone cancer treatment and looks visibly very different. Her dad, when dealing with that, is kind of one byproduct is he's a bit more emotionally available, I think, because he's just dealing with so much. So they have conversations that they've never had, and I think that's so relatable when you're an adult. You just have these conversations with your parents. You're like, oh, now all of that makes so much more sense. I wish you could have just been honest with me from the beginning. Sometimes they can and sometimes they can't, but anyways, she's in this place of reflection, and then she says, every time I struggled to fit into the world around me, I thought if I flew far away enough, like Chanji, that's the character in a story she talks about throughout the book, the perfect home would magically appear. But when your roots are tangled up across so many different places, that perfect world may not exist. So I'll grow my home from the ground up, using the roots I've nurtured with the people I love. There's so much about myself I've yet to explore, but right now, I don't know how to say her middle name. I'm Laura Gao, and my world is tall and mighty like the skies, infinite and mysterious like the cosmos, and peaceful and safe like the sea, which is the breakdown, as Kristen showed, of her name, her Chinese name, her given name. And I just really loved, this is the roots page. I love this page. But I think, like, for me, I moved around quite a bit as a kid. I've in many ways been different people in my life. My faith and religion has changed a lot. My geographical location, my how I would label myself with my sexuality has changed. And so in some ways, when people ask, where are you from? Or they ask these really simple questions, it's difficult for me to just have a simple answer. And I think that this book really hit me in that my experience is not like Laura's in most ways, but that feeling of having messy roots, but knowing you can really create your own, that those are all things that are a part of you and you're going to grow like who you are from them, was really powerful for me. So I loved that full circle moment. And I especially like the reclamation of her name, because that is like a theme throughout. Sometimes she feels very connected to her culture. Sometimes she's embarrassed of her culture. Sometimes she desperately wants to connect, but realizes she can't be like Wuhanese in this very traditional sense because she spent so much time in America. And I think it's okay if that's complicated. Like, it's okay if your story is complicated. And it's also important to acknowledge, like she said at the end, that you're going to keep growing. And like, that is also really important to recognize. So I loved the ending as well. I thought it was such a strong ending. I'm trying to think. A couple of things I did catch this time around. There's this running. What is it called? There's a word for it, like an image of the White Rabbit candy that comes throughout. And you can actually see in the cover image, or you can see a good example where there's a little bunny rabbit hiding in the moon. There are bunny rabbits like this throughout the whole book. I did not catch that my first time. I couldn't not see it. But it comes from this white rabbit candy, which they tell the story of. It's this Chinese candy maker who makes this milky candy. But originally he packages it in Mickey Mouse wrapping with a little Mickey. But then during regime changes in China, exactly. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
During regime changes in China, the Chinese felt like it was too Western, so they got rid of Mickey and they put a white rabbit. And this becomes sort of a symbol. She talks about how anywhere in the diaspora, you'll always know these white candies are there, but like the white candy, like the wrapper looks different, right? For everyone or for what time you're in, etc. But it's this like same candy. that everyone's having, and that candy represents like the evolution of China and the regime change, and it's sort of like a little bit of a running metaphor, I guess you could say, for good and for bad. So I like that she hid these little rabbits. I don't think they're all in some big, deep, meaningful place, but it was just a cute thing to find, especially reading it the second time when you're maybe able to pay more attention to that stuff because you already have the basics of the story. So I really loved that part a lot.
It also really made me want to try that candy.
Have you not had any?
No.
Oh, they're pretty good.
Okay.
They're not very sweet. They're not very sweet.
What do they taste like?
Exactly like she said, creamy, kind of vanilla-y, but more in the milk. Actually, well, you like boba tea, so it's kind of like the basic, where it's not too overly sugary. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
like,
gotcha.
Not fully tapioca, but kind of in between there. Yeah. Some of the funny bits, like I love her, no one can pronounce her name. And so she's like, I want an American name. And they're in Texas and Laura Bush is visiting. It just dated the book.
Yeah.
And the mom's like, what about Laura? And she goes nuts. She's just telling all her friends, she's like, what's more American than the first name?
I named after the first lady. And they were like, what's the first lady? And she's like, I don't know.
It was so funny. Oh, I loved that. And like she talks about how she wanted to go to American church with her friend Jessie, and she'd been going to her parents' church, Chinese Christian church, and she has such a funny relationship with the pastor of that church. But she's like going to the service with Jessie, and they're like, all homosexuals are going to hell, and she's like, yeah, it was probably better that I didn't understand everything that was going on. But she later sees Pastor Chang, and he's like, have you found any good Christian boys yet? And she's like, no, Pastor Chang, I'm leaving room for Jesus, which was also very much like such a saying. So there were just like elements that I thought were very textured, and she's not too far apart from us age-wise. So some of them were quite similar. I did have a question for you, though. She does take a test to figure out if she's gay, which who hasn't, on BuzzFeed. And the first question I wanted to ask you, it says, choose a breakfast food and we'll tell you if you're gay or not. What's the gayest breakfast food? What do you think?
What were the options during that quiz?
There's well, you can see a picture of milk and waffles, but I don't know that, or maybe these are French toast sticks. I'm not really sure.
I feel like waffles.
You think waffles?
Yeah. They
have range. You can make savory. You can make sweet. That's true.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have an answer. I was just curious, like, what would the gay food?
I don't know.
But yeah. Any other bits and bobs from this one, or you feel like we've got it?
I think we did it.
I love it.
Yeah.
Go read these 2 books.
Yep. Do it.
And read American Born Chinese, because you've read this though, right?
I haven't actually.
Girl.
I know. I haven't.
Oh, sorry, because I just love it so much. I got to keep talking about it. The one thing I was going to bring up in spoilers. So Cece Bell in El Deafo has this ongoing superhero, like kind of breaking the fourth wall. She's imagining it, etc. Laura Gao has that as well. She's got a fairy tale that runs through, but she also has video game. So she's like level up, and sometimes it's used, I thought, really well. Like here chapter 11, it was like choose your fighter, and it's like elements around college. But then on the next page, it's like all the different people she could be, right? Like choose your character, which is definitely how going to college can feel sometimes. So I liked that, but it is definitely, I think, an homage to this one, because there is a fantastical element to this story that adding those fantastical elements allows them, I think, to tackle things in a different way that might be harder to read if they were direct, like, adaptations of that moment or emotion, if that makes sense. So I definitely think, at least for Messy Roots, because she references this book so many times, it's kind of, I think including that was definitely an homage to this. So I definitely would recommend this guy. And he's so tiny. He's a good little stocking stuffer. We love it.
Love that.
Yeah.
So, not the pumpkin patch. What was it?
Crazed. We're at the Christmas tree lot.
Christmas tree lot.
What do you got?
Have?
Oh, you go. You go.
Okay. Mimosa, which you recently read.
I did. Yeah.
What was your overall rating?
It's a good question. 3 point something, I think.
Okay. I, of course, have read Grease Bats by this author, and I'm very excited for this. This was like a great Amazon deal that you told me about, so thank you for that.
7. Make it topless. Just take that top up. I think people want to see. That's beautiful.
See.
Oof.
It is beautiful. Yes.
And it was $7. I don't know how much it is right now, but it was a good deal.
Yeah, amazing
That was
deal.
A beautiful book.
Nice hardcover. So that's been sitting around. I'm excited for that. Reid recently read Dog Biscuits and really loved it by Alex Graham. It has Fantagraphics, set in 2020. You can see a mask on this cover, and he really liked it. So I'm like, oh, I need to read this. So,
wait, can you show me the cover again? Because I was looking up my rating. 3.5 is what I gave Mimosa.
Got it.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so I think it's like memoir stuff. I think it's autobio stuff, to my knowledge. So I don't know anything else about it. I'm just like, Reid loved it, so I'll read it. Also, the second volume of
Oh, Harley Quinn.
Joker Operation Joker. Hey, Bar. She's also in the first one, but she's not on the cover. Look at the little baby Batman.
Oh, little Brucey. Look at his little cap cowl.
I'm very excited for this. Bar.
I need to read the first one. I told you Maddie gave it to me as a part of a birthday gift, so I have it. Nice. I need to read it. And I know it's on DC Infinite, but
you do need to read
haven't gotten to it yet.
More DC, you guys. What's happening?
Oh,
so I saw my buddy Kyle the other day, and he's like, "Here you go." So he gave me the Batman the Brave and the Bold issue number 7 because his first Wild Dog story is in this.
Oh, cool! I haven't read that, but it looks cool.
Yeah.
Oh, he signed it. Look at that.
Yeah, I'm gonna read it. So
okay.
I'm excited to read his stuff. I think it's a 3-parter.
Oh, okay. Is that the first part?
That's the first part. The other ones aren't out yet. I don't know when they come out.
Okay.
And finally, I picked this up the other day at Second and Charles, The Sad Ghost Club, which I've heard a lot about.
I'm gonna read that.
Quite a long time, yeah. And I was excited to see it because this is like a UK book, but it was used at Second and Charles. So, look, there's a cat and there's a little ghosty. That's all. We love
little ghosts.
Come on now. All I need. So
I know. I wanna. If you love that, I wanna borrow it. Was it just by itself, or did they have a bunch? Because I got credit at your.
They just have the one, but it's an ever-changing inventory. So
and sometimes you get stuff that hasn't come out for a week.
That's right.
Those are good picks.
Thank
Is
you.
there like a book that or a book or two that you want to get to before the year's over? That's like a top priority type book.
I think I will definitely get to this one because that'll be an easy one for me.
I love it. Joker Volume 2.
Yeah. It's Joker 1, Operation Joker Volume 2.
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Like, how many Jokers do we need in this title? Doesn't make sense. And probably the Sad Ghost Club because there are 3 of these, and I really want to know if I need to keep getting them. So.
And I still never looked up when I asked you, is that from Instagram? I feel like you and I both follow a comic strip that's like the Sad Ghost Club on Instagram. And it's this little ghost. And sometimes he's like, it's okay if you can't get to it today because you can always try again tomorrow. And I'm like, is that the same person? See if there's an Instagram like linked in the back, maybe. I don't know. I'll check it out afterwards.
Okay.
But if it's that, I'm like mad I didn't know that they physically collected it. Because I love that he's so affirming, that ghost, for me personally.
We love him.
We want good things for him.
Yeah.
Well, I want to show, I have a haul of 2 books I want to show.
Please.
Just because. First one, throwback to, I don't know. What was your favorite book we read this fall? I was about to say my favorite, but I wanted to know yours first. I
have to remember what we read. So you tell me your favorite.
Okay. Well, I think my favorite, other than Messy Roots, of course, was The Secret Life of Albert Entwistle. And, I read a library copy. And it was hard it wasn't a floppy paperback. I was doing a lot to not hurt the spine, even though it wasn't my copy. So I found a used UK copy, which I don't love the cover as much, but I still like it. I will say it's
Yeah.
blurbed by Russell T Davies on the back. What's this? Ian McKellen blurbed it on the front.
Okay, Ian.
Okay, Ian. And of course it's much more bendy. So I feel like it's
nice.
So I
that
got myself
looks
my
so
own copy.
thick. Is what we read that thick?
The print is pretty big, Kristen.
Okay.
It's not large print.
I was like, why does it look huge?
Do the Brits have trouble like vision issues at a higher rate?
Brits?
Brits, please weigh in. Then I found this at Half Price Books a couple of days ago for $5. I didn't know this existed. It is Strangers in Paradise Treasury Edition. So it's the first volume. And it's like, here we go. A commentary, like here's the inspiration for this photo, or picture. Here's what I thought about XYZ. And I was like, that is so cool.
I have that at
$5.
I have that.
Oh, okay. Brag much. Okay. But like, look how big this is. Like,
yeah, no, that's cool. It's very cool.
Well, anyways, I'm excited about it, and I hope the chat's excited for me.
No, I'm excited for you. I'm just like, yeah, I've seen it because I went to this house at some point.
Somebody definitely, maybe they die. I don't know what's better, if they died or if they started hating Terry more. But when I was there, it was a bunch of old Strangers in Paradise volumes. It took everything in me to not be like, Jessica, you already own this in 2 different formats. I got the big chunky omnis and I got the digest versions, which is how I originally got them. You do not need like these little floppy trades. So I just got that.
You need
I
it.
thought
You
it was
should go back. Go back and get them.
No. Well, it'll still be there. I feel like Terry Moore is underappreciated by the general public.
There is a third option. This person didn't have to die or hate Terry Moore. They could just be like, we want to make shelf space.
They just upgraded. But that's actually the worst for me. Well, maybe not.
Why?
Because it's like, you didn't make the cut. Like, I wanted you to actively hate him.
Girl, you know how many books I've loved that I'm like, I don't need this on my shelf.
I know. Well, either way, I'm so glad, whoever you are out there in my Commonwealth, I thank you for your service, because I now have this cool item that Kristen already had, but it's still cool that I have it.
No, it is cool.
Books I'm actually reading, because obviously that does not quite count. I'm in the middle of These Burning Stars. I decided to go on a Frederick Bachman little rabbit hole, which I'll discuss in a second. So that has delayed me.
I've done some of them.
Yeah. This has delayed me, but this was the space opera, mystery, science fiction, multiple perspectives, adult book. So halfway through, I'm enjoying it, but as you can see, haven't raced through it. I am also 40% into All the Light We Cannot See. I have physically owned this book for years. It has sat on my shelf. I got it at like a little library when it was the book. So there were copies of it everywhere, and somebody put it in the little library and I was like, oh, I really want to read that. And then it just sat. It's sad. It's sad. But Crazed wanted to read this and we are buddy reading it. So I don't know where Crazed is at, but I sent her a message of my thoughts of the first 40%. But I don't know if anyone doesn't know what this is about, but it's a World War II historical fiction following 2 perspectives. One, the daughter of a museum employee who is blind, and then a young boy who is an orphan who's growing up in Germany, who's very gifted with, I guess you would say he's an engineer. He's really gifted at repairing things. He starts getting a reputation because he repairs a lot of radios. And their 2 stories, I believe, will intersect. Minor spoiler, they still haven't intersected yet. So I told Crazed, I feel like I'm steeping like a strong cup of tea. There's just been a lot of groundwork laid. This is the one, Kristen, that I sent you that has incredibly long chapters. This 500 something page book has 13 chapters.
I can't handle that.
They break up the chapters by these mini perspectives that are just 2 pages long. So I think that's helping because it propels you forward. You get a tease of one, you go to the other.
Okay.
So we'll be finishing this in the next 2 weeks. I am definitely enjoying it. That's all about that one. And then, girl, have I found my favorite book of the year? I don't know. I decided to, I was missing curmudgeonly old men after Albert. And I was like, I need a new curmudgeonly old man.
Are we going to talk about Uwe? Is that what we're going to do?
We're going to talk about Uwe. So A Man Called Uwe, Frederick Bachman's.
Uwe?
Yeah, because I listened to.
Oh, I remember them saying Uwe in the audiobook, but okay. Got it.
Uwe, like Tuva Janssen. Because remember when I was like, Toby?
Yeah, got it.
Same region. Uwe is easily, A Man Called Uwe is easily one of the most popular books of the last 10 years. I would say definitely. I think it's his most well known, and it's two of my friends' like actual favorite books of all time. So there's a lot of hype going into that one. And I do think the hype combined with me reading it back to back with Albert, I actually liked that Matt King book better than A Man Called Uwe. I did enjoy A Man Called Uwe. I gave it 4 stars. I again think if I read it when it very first came out and not back to back with Albert, it probably would have been 5, but I can't go back in time. So I definitely think it's worth a read. It was his first book, which made me anxious to read more. So then I moved on to Anxious People because I read it was one of his most creative. I would agree. This is a puzzle of a book. It's not told in order, and it shifts perspectives a lot, like constantly shifting perspectives. I regret listening to the audio because I think if I read it physically, I would have, and I read it in more concentrated batches, I think I would have made the connections quicker. That being said, I rated it 4.25. It was better for me than Uwe. And I actually think if I reread it physically, which I did get a physical copy of, it's how much I did enjoy it and want to reread it. I think I'd like it more because like when I say these stories are sometimes connected by the littlest clue, I mean like an out of context sentence will connect you to a character that's coming 5 chapters later. So it is not daunting to read. It's kind of satirical and funny. It's about a bank robbery that never happened. Very interesting book. And then I was like, I want to find one I love. This guy is so hyped. He's like one of the most popular authors easily, again, of the last 10 years or so. So then I moved on to Beartown, which I read physically. Girl, this book has sat with me in a way that no book has in a while. And it's hard to say it's my favorite of the year or anything close to that because it's not a book that I'm like, everyone needs to go read this. I don't think it's a book for everyone. But I do think, Kristen, you should read it. And I think the thing I love about Bachman, that's come through in all of his books, is this man observes humanity like no other author I've read recently. Like he captures what it means to be human in the briefest of sentences. I mentioned Anxious People shifts perspectives. This one does too. And he'll introduce a new character with 4 sentences. And in those 4 sentences, you know that character better than you know side characters of series you've been reading for years. Like he just like distills human emotion down so well. And it's not like fancy or anything like that. But this is essentially a much heavier read. Those other 2, Uwe has heavy elements, but it's definitely heartwarming. I think it's a heartwarming read through and through. I would not describe this book as heartwarming, but I would describe it as life affirming, and particularly around friendship. But this is essentially a book about a small town that is in Sweden. All of his books take place in Sweden, of course. That's a logging town. It's very remote. It's seen its better days. I live in a state that has a lot of towns and counties that had businesses that went out, industries that died, and have left the town like very disillusioned, unable to put their hope in any kind of future. And so I really connected with the people in this town. What they have put their hope into is their junior ice hockey team is about to make it to the semifinals. I've just started, you and I, Kristen, both have just started watching more hockey. So it was very timely. But I will say, if you don't love hockey or know anything about hockey, it doesn't affect your reading experience at all. But if you grew up in hockey culture or in one of these kinds of towns that I'm referring to, no matter what country it's in, you will definitely connect with the mindset of this. But it is essentially a lot about toxic masculinity and how it harms men particularly. I felt such empathy for the men and boys growing up in this community, and I just don't think we see that a lot. There are certainly other aspects of this story that you know are very present, but that's a big one that sticks out for me because I just don't think we see that a lot. And I hope a lot of men have read this book or hope they will read this book, because I just think it treats those stories with such compassion while still being very honest about the dynamics present in a culture with a lot of toxic masculinity. I will also just warn people, if there is a trigger warning that you're particularly sensitive to, do look them up, or you can message me on social media and I'll tell you. I don't want to mention what happens in the middle of this book amidst the hype of going to the semifinals that taints the book a lot. But the reason I'm not going to mention it is not because it's sensationalized, but I've never seen this event depicted in this way, where the lead up and the fallout is so honest and well done. Like, I've just never read anything like that before. So this is the first in a trilogy. Apparently you don't have to read them in any order, but that doesn't make any sense to me. So of course I will. I just finished it yesterday, but I wanted to talk about it because it was really impactful for me. And I think, again, it's not an overly heavy read, but it isn't like a breezy comical read or heartwarming read like some of his others. So do like be in the right state. But winter is a great time to pick this one up for sure. So now you've heard my sermon on Beartown. Kristen, I do want you to read it and I do want to talk to you about it. But I'm going to move on to Us Against You, which is the next one. I saw it. You added so many of his books. Every time I would add one, I'm like, okay, but she hasn't read it yet. Because Uva's the only one, right, that you've read? Or have you read another of Baki?
No, I read another. I can't think of the name of it. And I have Anxious People on my shelf. And
I'd be so curious what you think about that.
It's so funny. You're like, I don't want to tell you the event that happens, because that's the only thing I know about that book is the event that happens. So,
and I didn't know. I will say this is the first chapter. 4 sentences. This girl walks into a forest and shoots a double-barreled shotgun. That's what you know at the beginning. And then the first half is like, here's the town, here are the people. Let's talk about hockey. We're on the precipice. Then this event happens, and then the fallout of that event. But again, you can look it up. I would, if you have certain trigger warnings you're very sensitive to. But I also want to say it doesn't sensationalize it. Like, even if it is the only thing you know about the books, never sensationalized, and I think is handled with so much thought and empathy. And I really appreciated that.
I also read And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer.
Oh, okay. That's a short one, I think, right? Like a novella. Yeah, that's on my list too. Yeah, I'd love to. I've been thinking about my 2024 reading goals, and finishing his back catalog and Jennifer McMahon's is definitely on there. I know you and I both want to finish Riley Sager this year, and I think we both have one left, but it's not the same one.
Left.
Oh,
so I don't think I'm gonna do it, but we'll see.
I'm hoping to. Yeah, so that's what I'm picking up at the Christmas tree lot. Let us know what you are, either in the comments now or later. Hello,
William. Craze says she's getting there. Sorry about the overtime.
Yeah, but listen, take your time. I marked the voice memo so that you wouldn't have any spoilers.
And my dad finished a beautifully foolish endeavor, which is rude that he's telling the chat, but he didn't text me about that. What did you think, Dad? What's happening? And Peter David's Hulk #1 and Noir Burlesque. Cool. Love that.
Good picks at the Christmas tree lot.
Well, I hope you've all enjoyed the Fall Into Reading program. We've done it. We did the thing.
We did the thing. We'll be taking a break for this winter.
Yeah.
Rest, recuperate, spend the holidays.
Sleep,
But
you need.
We may have some things. We may have some surprises along the way that are not quite a full program, but we hope to join you back sometime in the spring. Yeah. And if there's anything you really think we should read in future installments, we would love comments. I've been thinking of a few. I think we need to do a classic, like one classic literature movie in the spring.
I'm into that.
The challenge. So if you have any things like that you'd like us to check out, also put those in the comments. And if you found any great deals, let's make everyone broke, including me. Put those in the comments.
Tell us immediately before we miss out on the deals.
But yeah, it's been great. I'm glad we ended on a high note.
Yeah, me too.
Can't wait to do it again.
And thank you everyone for watching. Please leave comments about what we should read next.